Seminar 7, I talk about why you better stick with the King James Bible, because all the other ones have real serious problems, including what we'll get into about the Great Pyramid, believe it or not. There's a video, I've had 10 people send me links to it. Oh, you got to watch this video because there's 100 years missing, and the Septuagint adds it because he settled when the Great Pyramid was built. They said you have to add 100 years to these first four guys here. 5 guys. 1, 2, 3, first 4. So they're saying, he said that puts the timing of the pyramid differently than the King James has it. Well, that's what I'm going to talk about briefly here. I'll do a whole presentation on this sometime. But I called Gail Ripplinger, my friend in, could you get me the book, the black one that she writes, New Age Bible Versions, if you would. Do I have it here? It's in the library somewhere, but we sell it. It's well worth getting. If you can only get one book on the topic of which Bible version is right, this is the one you ought to get and read. It is incredible. Yeah, that one. Thank you, ma'am. Okay. So I said, Gail, there's a guy who did a YouTube claiming that the King James is wrong. We need to add 100 years to the first 4 guys here, and that explains the story about the pyramid. Because he starts off saying, when were the pyramids built? Were they built before the flood? Were they built during the flood? Why is there no flood markings on the pyramid? And he's trying to use that to discredit the King James. And so Gail gave me a 4-page answer that's fabulous. Nick, can you, we need to get this posted on our website, the whole article. Send it to Steve. Yeah. Anna's got the actual email, right? Yeah. Okay, make sure it gets to Steve and tell him to post it on our website under, she titled it The Art of Deceit. I said, Gail, she's awfully sick, so pray for her health. But I said, Gail, would you watch the video and then make your comments? Because the guy's claiming you have to add 100 years and it solves the problem. The flood was 500 years earlier than the King James dates would add up to, or something like that. She said, an internet presentation titled, Were the Pyramids Built Before the Flood? Is a veiled attempt to discredit and dismiss the Old Testament Hebrew text, the King James Bible, the Standard Bible Chronology, and creation science, which helps to expose the faulty theory of evolution. I'm not going to read the whole article, just a couple paragraphs here. The strange Bible chronology the presentation puts forth is based on errors in 3 scarcely used and obscure critical texts. The faulty Greek Septuagint. I'm surprised how many people say, well, it says in the Septuagint, blah, blah, blah. You better study where this Septuagint comes from, okay? And the Samaritan Pentateuch, you might want to study where that comes from before you put any credence to that. And the Dead Sea Scrolls, be careful about that. These editions contradict the entire body of often used and copied Hebrew manuscripts, whose readings are now seen in the King James Bible. Keep in mind, in Psalm 12, I'll show you that in a second, God promised he would preserve his words. Okay, well, where are they? I would like to hold them. If anybody says, well, that Bible's got a corruption in it, well, then where's the correct one? So here's the story about the pyramids. Now, keep in mind, part of the problem with the video that I saw, and which I watched twice, the guy did on the Great Pyramids with beautiful graphics, great editing, lousy content. He talks about the pyramids plural. The question is really about the Great Pyramid. All the other ones are miniature copies the Egyptians built of the big one. Apparently they saw the big pyramid and said, we want to be buried in one of those, and so they had all their slaves build them a small version of it. But the big one is what the question is about, not all the pyramids. So there are 4 theories about the Great Pyramid. 1, it was built by godly people before the flood to be some kind of symbol. 2, it was built by heathen before the flood. 3, it was built by godly people after the flood, again to give some kind of symbol for Christianity or whatever, or built by heathen after the flood. I doubt it was built during the flood.
Oh, wait, you forgot one.
Huh?
Aliens.
Aliens, yeah, aliens, okay. The Great Pyramid is the one that's in question. The rest of them, I don't think anybody argues, they know who built them because the guy's name is plastered all over the place in hieroglyphics. This is King George, the greatest guy that ever lived, you know. So they were built to honor themselves. Okay. The Bible says in Isaiah, in the last day there shall be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border thereof. It shall be a sign and for a witness unto the Lord of hosts in the land of Egypt. Now, the Great Pyramid is built right on, I've heard, right on the dividing line between northern and southern. After when Egypt had a civil war, it was on the line, north and south of the pyramid. They call it Upper and Lower Egypt. To us, Upper is north. To them, Upper is higher elevation. So it's actually Upper's south. But who cares? The Great Pyramid is fascinating. It has one entrance which leads all the way down to the pit. However, you can choose to take the narrow way, which takes you up to the king's chamber. You have a choice. You want to take the broad way down to the pit or the narrow way to the king's chamber. There's a sermon in there someplace, I believe. Okay. As you go up the narrow way, it widens out into the great gallery, which has 153 steps. 153. Remember when they caught all the fish in the New Testament? They said how many fish were in that big net? 153 great fish. Why 153? Well, Google my YouTube article I did, or on, I forget what's on our website someplace. 17. What a number! 17 times 9. It's in my Why on Earth Did God Let This Happen book.
I don't know if it's in that one. It's in the
17, what a number. Let's see if it's in this one.
But you did do a YouTube video on it.
I did a YouTube on it. Let's see. It must be in book 2. That's only available as an ebook, not available. Just go to the website, Dr. Dino. Anyway, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 all the way to 17 is 153. The middle number between 1 and 17 is 9. 9 times 17 is 153. 153 is the only number. Now, one of this, I think it's the first number where it's the sum of the cube of its digits. What? 1 times 1 cubed plus 5 cubed plus 3 cubed comes back to 153. There's all kinds of cool stuff about it. I taught math for years. I like that stuff. Anyway, the pyramid has 153 steps in this grand gallery. It's the largest building in the world by far. It contains enough stone to build a 10-foot high brick wall all the way around Texas. That's a long ways if you've never driven across Texas, okay? Some of the stones weigh 70 tons and the top is 455 feet high. And the entrance starts you on the broad way, which leads to the pit, or the narrow way to the king's chamber, and the king's chamber is on the 50th row of stones. 50, the year of Jubilee. In there you can encounter nothing but an empty tomb. Once you're in the king's chamber, there's an empty tomb. The pyramid was originally covered with 144,000 smooth, polished casing stones, which they later stole off of there to build other stuff around Egypt. They stripped the limestone case. They were highly polished casing stones. They were fit together so tightly that in most cases you couldn't even find the seams, and you certainly couldn't put a piece of paper between them. These are ginormous rocks. How they lifted them, how they put them up there, and how they made them fit, I don't know, but they did. Something was amazing. There were 144,000 in the book of Revelation chapter 7 that are going to be sealed with the whole body of Christ is fitly joined together. Maybe this is all symbolic. I happen to believe the Great Pyramid was built by somebody godly, probably before the flood, and then it was copied afterwards. A totally sealed building like that, a sealed pyramid, what would a flood do to it? Get it wet. And then it would dry out. So I don't know, it might have been built after the flood, we'll see. The chief cornerstone was never put in place. The top goes up to the top, and the top was never put on. Jesus Christ is the chief cornerstone. The stone that the builders rejected. The stone that was, Luke 20, it was a stone cut out without hands, which smote the image on the feet. I think it's all symbolic from Daniel chapter 2. He saw the New Jerusalem coming down from heaven. I think it's coming in the future here. The great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven. So Noah Hutchings did a great book on that. It's in my library somewhere here, who knows, about the Great Pyramid. Fascinating. He thinks it was built to be a testimony to the Lord. He calls it the Bible in stone. Keep in mind, Adam and Eve did not have a Bible. So God probably gave them the whole gospel story, including the future, in the stars. The gospel in the stars. Noah did not have a Bible. Well, he had the first couple chapters. God probably gave him the whole thing, including the future, in stone, in the pyramid. That's just one theory. Now, the Satanists have tried to monopolize that and steal that for their kingdom, you know. Notice the all-seeing eye, representing Lucifer, is not attached to the pyramid. He hasn't quite established his new world order yet. And it says on your dollar bill, Norvis Ordo Seclorum, New World Order, on your dollar bill. And the date over here, 1776. Well, that's the year they started the Illuminati, too. Anyway, that's right. You can chase that rabbit all you want. But so what happened was, after the flood, some of the Egyptians said, I want to be buried in one of those, and so they made a bunch of lesser pyramids. So the guy confuses the two. Let me finish a couple more thoughts on why this video that's going around like saying we got to change the Bible and add 100 years to each of these names from Genesis chapter 10 or 11, where it gives the names of how old they were, saying there's an error in the King James. You have to add 100 years because it says so in the Septuagint. So instead of Arphaxad being 35 when his son is born, they said he was 135. And Shem, instead of being, or Selah, instead of being 30, he was 130. They added 100 years to each one to try to rescue the problem with the pyramid, which doesn't exist. Okay, let's see. Her intro is fabulous here. We'll get the whole article up. You can read it, but I wanted to show the presenter of this video begins with a bald error regarding the source of the Hebrew text underlying the King James Bible. He graphically wrongly shows the King James coming from the Leningrad Codex. Referring to that codex, the presenter says, all our Bibles are translated from this corrupted copy of the Hebrew. In fact, only modern versions use the Leningrad text, which is the foundation of their underlying corrupt biblical Hebraica Stuttgartensia. The King James Bible never used the Leningrad Codex, which was initially assessed for biblical criticism in 1937, 300 years after the King James Bible was written. She covers all this in this book right here. What is this one, 25 bucks or something? $24. It's fabulous on the topic of which Bible version you should be using. Of the Hebrew Old Testament text, Romans 3 says, unto them were committed the oracles of God, talking about the Hebrews. The Hebrews, not the Greeks or Samaritans, were charged with preserving the Old Testament Hebrew text. The Jews have never accepted either the Greek Septuagint or the Sumerian Pentateuch. The internet presentation, called Were the Pyramids Built Before the Flood, bases its entire thesis and chronology on these two wobbly and corrupt documents, which even secular scholars admit are highly corrupted. To present these two untrustworthy texts pretend that they represent an old text. The presenter misrepresents the age, date, and origin of these two texts. So then she talks about three blind mice, following three blind mice, the Samaritan Pentateuch, the Septuagint, and the Dead Sea Scrolls. It gives a history of each one of them here. So we'll get the whole thing up there, but those of you that have sent me copies of that video claiming we need to throw out the King James because they're missing 100 years in each of those names, no, they're not. They're exactly correct as preserved. Let me get to home, and I'll give a quick why the King James, and here's the story behind that. Satan started his career, first words out of his mouth in the Garden of Eden. We're trying to get people to doubt God's word. Yea, hath God said. Eve, you sure God said that? And Psalm 12 in the King James says, the words of the Lord are pure words, as silver tried in a furnace of earth, purified 7 times. Thou shalt keep them. What does the them refer to? The words. Thou shalt keep them, O Lord, thou shalt preserve them from this generation forever. If you read it in the NIV, the non-inspired version, it says, the words of the Lord are flawless, like silver purified in a furnace of clay, purified 7 times. O Lord, you will keep us safe and protect us from such people. What? Protect us from such people? No, he promised to preserve his words. Well, they can't say he's going to preserve his words because they just got done changing thousands of them to make the NIV. So they don't want to say that. What happened was, shortly after the time of Christ, the New Testament books were written. Copies were made by the thousands and spread all over the world. They were very careful. It takes about 10 months to write out a copy of the Bible. They don't even have a good pen. They got a feather, okay? They got to keep dipping in the inkwell. You don't even have smooth paper to write on. You're writing on parchment or leather. So about 10 months would be a very laborious process. Then, in the starting in the 1300s, they began translating these texts into English. King James is the 7th attempt to translate into English, the 7th purification, I believe. And they used 95% of the Tyndale Bible because they thought this is near perfect. You know, just made a few little minor changes. Okay, meanwhile, down in Egypt, there was a cult known as the Alexandrians. Origen is the guy that they talk about here, and about 184 AD he was born. He did a corrupt text. He left out stuff he didn't like out of the Bible and started a cult down in Egypt. Alexandria, there's nothing good in Alexandria. Nothing good comes out of Egypt, period, in the Bible. Alexandria, they're the folks disputing with Stephen in the book of Acts chapter 6. That's the first mention of Alexandria. There was a ship of Alexandria. I cover that in, I think it's in this book here, the ship of Alexandria. I wrote a letter to the captain of the ship of Alexandria, where I covered that in one of my knee mails, where you're on your knees. Yeah, the ship of Alexandria, page 112. If you don't have this is one I wrote from prison, one of a series of 5, which we're trying to get the other 4 out there. I think it'd really be helpful if you've had trouble and trials in life. The title, Why on Earth Did God Let This Happen, for Heaven's Sake? You ever been there before? You wondered, why did God let this happen? This may help you. What's that? $35? Well, because we only get a few printed at a time, and it's expensive. Get 10,000 printed at a time, we can drop the price. But Goliath. David killed Goliath, right? Got the rock, slung it around, whap, and Goliath said, boy, nothing like that ever entered my mind before. And then he fell down, and David cut off his head. Okay. Well, it says there was a battle in Gob with the Philistines where Elhanan, the son of somebody with a long name, the Bethlehemite, slew the brother of Goliath. Would that be possible for Elhanan to kill the brother of Goliath? No problem. NIV says Elhanan killed Goliath.